My name is Eleanor. I am 69 years old, and on the day my husband's will was read, my sons divided $30 million between themselves as if it were a poker game. Stephen got the construction companies. Daniel inherited the restaurant chain, the estates, the luxury condos, the sports cars, everything. Absolutely everything. And I, after 45 years of dedicated marriage, after sacrificing my entire life for that family, received a dusty envelope that looked like trash. My daughter-in-law Jessica laughed in my face and said, "At least you can use it to store recipes, mother-in-law." Stephen didn't even look at me. Daniel sighed, as if my very existence was a burden. Humiliated and shattered, I walked out of that office feeling like my life was worthless. But what they didn't know was that tonight, when I opened that despised envelope in the solitude of my home, I would find something that would change everything forever. Arthur had died just a week ago. Pancreatic cancer took him in 6 cruel and painful months. For 45 years, he had been my partner, my refuge, the man who built an empire from scratch, working day and night. I was always by his side. When he stayed up until dawn reviewing numbers, I brought him coffee and stayed awake waiting for him. When he had to travel for business for weeks on end, I managed the house alone and raised our 2 sons without ever complaining. When the banks wouldn't lend him money to expand the business, I sold the jewelry my mother had given me to help him get the capital he needed. I never asked for recognition. I never claimed credit. I just loved my husband and trusted that he would take care of me when the time came. How wrong I was. The reading of the will took place at the office of Rose Albright, the family lawyer. I arrived early, wearing my best violet dress, the one Arthur had given me on our last anniversary. I thought it would be a formality. After half a century together, it was logical that my husband would have left me protected. My sons could inherit the business, but I should have enough to live with dignity. Rose began to read in a cold, professional voice. To my son Stephen, I leave the construction companies, valued at $12 million. Stephen smiled like a child on Christmas morning. To my son Daniel, I leave the restaurant chain, which generates $8 million a year. Daniel settled into his chair with satisfaction. The estates on the coast, the condos downtown, the luxury cars, the main accounts. Everything was divided between them like the spoils of war. $30 million were split equally while I sat there, invisible, waiting to hear my name. When Rose finished reading the endless list of properties my sons were inheriting, she paused. She looked at some papers and said, "For Mrs. Eleanor Herrera." My heart sped up. Finally, I was going to hear what the love of my life had left me. Rose continued, "I leave her this personal envelope," and she handed me a yellowish, dusty envelope that looked like it had been stored for years in some forgotten drawer. I took it with trembling hands while my sons exchanged satisfied glances. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, couldn't contain her laughter. "At least you can use it to store recipes, mother-in-law." Stephen didn't even look up from the documents he was reviewing. Daniel sighed, as if my presence were an annoyance to be tolerated. The envelope weighed almost nothing in my hands. It felt empty. It felt like a mockery. Rose closed the will folder and turned to my sons to explain the legal procedures they had to follow to take possession of their inheritance. They talked about wire transfers, deeds, and corporations. As if I wasn't there. As if I were a ghost sitting in that leather chair. I stood up slowly, put the envelope in my purse, and walked to the door. No one said goodbye. No one asked if I needed help. No one offered me a ride home. I left that office with a broken heart, feeling that 45 years of love and sacrifice had been reduced to a dusty envelope that probably contained a sentimental letter with no real value. I walked through the streets of the city, where I had lived my entire adult life, where I had built a family that now treated me like garbage, and I cried like I hadn't cried since I was an abandoned child. That night, sitting in the living room of my empty house, with the silence weighing like a tombstone on my shoulders, I decided to open the envelope. My hands trembled as I broke the yellowed seal. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. I unfolded it slowly and read the words written in Arthur's unmistakable handwriting. Arthur's handwriting was unmistakable. That elegant script I had seen in thousands of love letters during our courtship, on birthday cards, On notes he left me in the kitchen before he went to work. But this time, the words I read took my breath away. For the woman who always truly loved me. Bank account number 847291635CHE Swiss International Bank, Geneva. And below that, a line that made me tremble. What you find here is only the beginning. They didn't deserve to know the truth, but you do. My heart began to beat so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. A Swiss bank account? What was Arthur talking about? For 45 years of marriage, he had told me everything about his businesses, or so I thought. What secrets had he kept? What truth was it that my sons didn't deserve to know? I stayed up all night, tossing and turning in bed, with that piece of paper clutched to my chest. The next day, I called the bank. My shaky English was met by an operator who spoke perfectly. I gave her the account number, my personal information, and after a wait that felt like an eternity, I heard the words that changed my life forever. Mrs. Herrera, the current balance in your account is 100 million United States dollars. 100 million. The phone slipped from my hands and fell to the floor. $100 million. More than 3 times what my sons had inherited combined. I sat on the kitchen floor, shaking, trying to process what I had just heard. Arthur had left me a secret fortune, a fortune that no one knew about, a fortune that made the 30 million from the official will look like pocket change. But that wasn't all, the operator continued. Ma'am, we also have instructions to courier you a safe deposit box that your husband deposited here 2 years ago. We can schedule the delivery. A safe deposit box. What else had Arthur kept hidden? What other secrets awaited me? I accepted the delivery for the next day and hung up the phone with trembling hands. My mind was a whirlwind of questions. How had Arthur acquired so much money without me noticing? Why had he kept it a secret? Why had he decided to leave it only to me? And the question that tormented me the most, what truth was it that my sons didn't deserve to know? The courier arrived the next day, at 10 o'clock in the morning sharp. It was a small but heavy safe, with a combination that came in a sealed envelope. The numbers were our wedding date, June 15th, 1980. Typical of Arthur, always so romantic, even in his darkest secrets. I closed the living room curtains, unplugged the phone, and sat in front of the safe with my heart racing. I dialed the combination and heard the click of the mechanism opening. Inside were documents, photographs, letters, and a thick envelope with my name written in large letters. I opened it with trembling hands and began to read the most shocking letter of my life. My dearest Eleanor, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means I have passed away and our sons have shown their true colors at the reading of the will. I know they humiliated you. I know they treated you like trash. I know they laughed at you when they gave you that dusty envelope, but I needed it to happen this way. I needed them to show who they really are before you knew the truth. During the last 2 years of my life, I discovered things about Stephen and Daniel that broke my heart. Things you do not know. Things that forced me to make difficult decisions. The $100 million you found in the Swiss account are only part of my real fortune. There is more. Much more. But before you know everything, you need to know the truth about our sons. My world swayed. What truth? What had Arthur discovered? I continued reading, my soul on edge. Stephen is not the successful businessman he appears to be. For 3 years, he has been siphoning money from my company to cover his gambling debts. He owes over $2 million to loan sharks who are not exactly understanding. Jessica doesn't know, but he has mortgaged their house twice and is about to lose it. The documents proving all this are in this box. I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. My older son, who had always been my pride, was a compulsive gambler who had stolen from the family business. But the letter continued, and what I read about Daniel was even worse. Daniel has a cocaine addiction that he has been hiding for 5 years. He has secretly sold 3 properties I had given him to finance his habit. But the most serious thing is that he is involved with drug traffickers who are blackmailing him. They threatened to kill him if he didn't pay them $500,000 by the end of the year. The documents of his debts and the photographs proving his addiction are also in this box. Tears began to stream down my cheeks. How had I been so blind? How had I not realized that my sons were destroying their lives? Arthur's letter continued, revealing darker and darker secrets. But what hurts me the most, my love, is what they plan to do with you. I heard them talking one night in my study. They thought I was asleep from the medication, but I heard every word. Stephen told Daniel that when I died, they had to get rid of you as quickly as possible. Jessica suggested they declare you mentally incompetent and have you committed to a nursing home. Daniel said it would be easy to get a doctor to sign the necessary papers. They wanted to take your share of the inheritance and lock you away somewhere you wouldn't be an inconvenience to their plans. The paper grew damp with my tears. My own sons, my own flesh and blood. They had planned to lock me away like a sick animal to steal my money. That's why I made the decision to protect you, Arthur continued. That's why I moved the bulk of my fortune to accounts only you can access. That's why I let them have the crumbs from the official will, while you have access to the real inheritance. The $100 million are just the beginning, my love. There are properties in Europe, investments in Asia, accounts in tax havens. In total, more than $200 million that are now yours. But I also leave you something more valuable, the truth. And with that truth, the power to decide what to do with our sons. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the letter. $200 million, a fortune that made my son's official inheritance look like loose change. The letter ended with a sentence that was seared into my soul. You decide whether you use this information to protect yourself or to teach them a lesson they will never forget. I can no longer take care of you, but I have given you the weapons to take care of yourself. With all my eternal love, Arthur. I put the letter down on the table and looked at the contents of the safe. There were photographs of Daniel using drugs, bank documents showing Stephen's debts, contracts signed with dangerous loan sharks, audio recordings on small devices I didn't dare listen to yet. My husband had been a private detective during his last years, meticulously documenting the corruption of our own sons. And now that explosive information was in my hands. I sat in that room for hours, surrounded by photographs that destroyed the image I had of my children. Daniel with glassy eyes, snorting cocaine in the bathroom of some nightclub. Stephen signing documents with men in dark suits who were clearly not legitimate bankers. Casino receipts for thousands of dollars. Pawn shop tickets for items I thought they still owned. My perfect world, my exemplary family, was crumbling before my eyes like a house of cards. But what hurt the most wasn't the addictions or the debts. It was the plan they had hatched to get rid of me. In one of the recordings I finally dared to listen to, I heard Jessica's voice saying, "Once she's committed, we can sell the family house and split the money. She's an old woman. She won't notice a thing." And Stephen's reply, "Mom was always so naive. It'll be easy to convince her it's for her own good." Over the next few days, I dedicated myself to investigating every document Arthur had left in that safe. He had hired private investigators to follow our sons. He had recorded phone conversations. He had photographed secret meetings. My husband had built a complete file on Stephen and Daniel's lies and betrayals. And among all those papers, I found something that chilled my blood. A contract signed between my sons and a specialized geriatric care company. They had already paid the deposit to commit me to a place called Willow Creek Senior Living, a private nursing home 3 hours from the city. The contract was dated 2 weeks before Arthur's death. They had planned to lock me away before their father even died. They had planned to rob me while I was mourning at his funeral. The phone rang one morning as I was reviewing bank documents. It was Stephen, using that fake voice he used when he wanted something. "Mom, we need to talk. Jessica and I are worried about you. You've been very quiet since the funeral." Worried? How ironic. I told him I was fine, that I just needed time to process the loss. But he insisted. "It's not good for you to be alone in that big house. We've been thinking about options to make you more comfortable." There it was. The plan was beginning to unfold. "What kind of options?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Well, there are some very nice places where you can have company, activities, 24-hour medical care, places where you don't have to worry about a thing. Places like Willow Creek Senior Living," I thought, feeling rage begin to boil inside me. That same afternoon I received another call, this time from Daniel. "Mom, Stephen told me you spoke this morning. I think it's an excellent idea for you to consider moving somewhere more suitable for your age. His voice sounded nervous, as if he were reading from a script. Besides, he continued, we need to talk about finances. Dad left you the house, but the upkeep is very expensive. The taxes, the utilities, the repairs. It would be better to sell so you can live somewhere without those worries. Selling the house, of course, was part of the plan. Get rid of me and take whatever they could. I'm in no hurry to make decisions, I replied. We just buried your father. But Mom, he insisted, the longer you wait, the harder it will be. At your age, changes are complicated. It's better to act fast. At my age, as if I were a senile old woman incapable of taking care of herself. Over the following days, the calls intensified. Stephen, Daniel, and Jessica took turns pressuring me. They would show up at my house unannounced, always with brochures for senior living facilities and arguments about my safety and well-being. Look at this place, Mom, Jessica would say, showing me pictures of gardens and activity rooms. They have physical therapy, painting classes, excursions. You would be so happy here, but I had researched that place. It was a gilded cage where relatives deposited inconvenient elders and forgot about them forever. The online reviews spoke of medical negligence, terrible food, and abusive staff. A perfect place for someone to slowly disappear from the world. One afternoon, while pretending to consider their suggestions, I decided to test them. You're right, I told them during a forced family dinner. Maybe it is time to make some changes. But first, I'd like you to help me with something. Their eyes lit up, thinking I had given in. Of course, Mom, whatever you need, Stephen said with a fake smile. I want to review all of your father's company documents. I want to understand exactly what you inherited and how the business works. The silence that followed was deafening. Stephen and Daniel exchanged nervous glances. Don't worry about that, Mom, Daniel said quickly. We'll take care of everything. You don't have to bother with paperwork. But I insist, I continued. After 45 years of building that empire with your father, I have a right to know what will happen to it. Jessica chimed in with that condescending smile. I hated so much. Mother-in-law, those things are very complicated. Numbers, taxes, contracts. It's better to let the men handle it while you relax in your new home. The men. As if I were a child incapable of understanding basic math. Besides, Stephen added, we've already made some important decisions. We've sold one of the estates to pay off company debts. Sold an estate? What debts? Arthur had been dead for barely a month, and they were already liquidating properties. What kind of debts? I asked. Boring stuff, Mom. Taxes, suppliers, payroll. Don't you worry about it. But I knew the truth. I knew Stephen had used that money to pay his loan sharks. I knew they were plundering the inheritance to cover their vices. That night, alone in my house, I made a decision. I was not going to be the silent victim they expected. I was not going to let them lock me in a nursing home while they stole everything Arthur and I had built together. I had $200 million. I had proof of their crimes. And I had something they had underestimated. 45 years of experience being the wife of a brilliant businessman. I had learned more than they thought. I had absorbed more knowledge than they imagined. And now it was time to use all of it to my advantage. I picked up the phone and called the Swiss bank. It was time to start moving my pieces in this deadly chess game my own sons had started. The next day, as I was having breakfast, the doorbell rang. It was an older, elegantly dressed man who introduced himself as George Maxwell, an attorney, Mrs. Herrera. I'm here on behalf of your late husband. I have specific instructions to carry out. Arthur had hired independent lawyers, different from Rose, to handle his secret affairs. George handed me a thick folder full of legal documents. Your husband asked me to deliver this to you exactly 1 month after his death. These are legal powers, contracts, and authorities that will allow you to take full control of all his companies if you so choose. Full control. Arthur hadn't just left me money. He had left me the keys to the kingdom. Your sons do not know these documents exist, George continued. According to your husband's instructions, you have the power to revoke their inheritances if you deem they are not meeting the family's ethical standards. George Maxwell sat in my living room and began to explain documents that seemed to come from a spy movie. Your husband was very meticulous, Mrs. Herrera. These contracts grant you 51% of the shares in all the family businesses. On paper, your sons inherited control, but legally, you are the majority shareholder. My head was spinning as I tried to process the information. How is that possible? The will rose red. That will, George interrupted, only covered the visible assets. Your husband created a complex corporate structure where the companies are under the umbrella of a family holding company. And you, Mrs. Herrera, are the owner of that holding company. Arthur had been playing chess, while we all thought he was playing checkers. He had built a perfect legal trap, disguised as a generous inheritance for his sons. But there's more, George continued, opening another folder. Your husband also tasked me with investigating your son's activities for the last 3 years. What we discovered is enough to completely nullify their inheritances and, in some cases, to initiate criminal proceedings. He showed me photographs I had already seen in the safe, but also new documents. Irregular bank transfers, fraudulent contracts, fake invoices. Stephen has been diverting funds from the construction company to pay gambling debts. In total, he has stolen nearly $3 million. Daniel has used company vehicles to transport drugs, turning the family restaurants into money laundering centers. Each revelation was like a hammer blow to my chest. How had I raised 2 criminals without realizing it? George took out an audio recorder and played it. I immediately recognized my son's voices. When the old lady is locked up, Stephen was saying, "We can liquidate everything and get out of the country. With 50 million each, we can start over in Europe." Daniel's voice replied, "Yeah, but we have to act fast. The cartel is pressuring me for the money I owe. If I don't pay them soon, they're going to start killing people." "Don't worry," Stephen continued. "In 2 weeks, Mom will be committed and will have access to all the accounts. Rose has already prepared the mental incapacity documents." My blood ran cold. They weren't just planning to rob me. They were planning to flee the country after destroying everything Arthur had built. "Your husband recorded this conversation 3 weeks before he died," George explained. "That's why he accelerated all the legal preparations. He knew he had little time to protect you. He handed me a new cell phone. This device is directly connected to my office and to the police. If you feel threatened at any moment, press the red button and help will be on its way." The reality of my situation began to sink in. I wasn't just dealing with ungrateful children. I was dealing with desperate criminals who saw my death or disappearance as the solution to all their problems. "What do you recommend I do?" I asked him. George smiled, an expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Your husband asked me to tell you this verbatim. Eleanor, you are stronger and smarter than they think. It's time they found out who they're messing with." That night, after George left, I sat in front of my vanity mirror and truly looked at myself for the first time in months. I saw a 69-year-old woman, with gray hair I had let grow naturally, with wrinkles that told the story of 4 decades of smiles and tears. But I also saw something I had forgotten existed: fierceness. For all those years of being the perfect wife, the selfless mother, I had buried the fighter I had been in my youth. The woman who had sold her jewelry to help Arthur build his empire, the woman who had worked double shifts when money was tight, the woman who had fought against banks, suppliers, and competitors to protect her family. That woman was still there, dormant but not dead, and it was time to wake her up. The next day, I began my counterattack. First, I called the bank and transferred $10 million to a local account. I needed immediate liquidity for what I had planned. Next, I hired a private security firm to watch my house 24 hours a day. If my sons planned to speed up my commitment, they were going to meet more resistance than they expected. I also hired a forensic accountant to audit all the family businesses. I wanted official documentation of every penny they had stolen. Finally, I visited 3 different criminal defense attorneys and gave them copies of all the evidence I had against Stephen and Daniel. I wanted to be prepared for any scenario. Stephen showed up at my house, unannounced, on Friday morning. He was accompanied by Jessica and a man who introduced himself as Dr. Evans, a specialist in geriatrics. The plan was in motion. "Mom," Stephen said with that fake smile that now nauseated me, We brought the doctor to give you a general checkup. We just want to make sure you're okay." The supposed doctor carried a black briefcase and a condescending attitude that made my blood boil. "I don't need a checkup," I replied firmly. "I feel perfectly fine." "But Mom," Jessica insisted, "at your age, it's important to have regular checkups. The doctor just wants to ask you a few simple questions." Simple questions. Like the ones used to declare someone mentally incompetent. "Mrs. Herrera," the fake doctor said in a syrupy voice, "I just need to assess your cognitive state. These are routine procedures." He took some forms from his briefcase that I recognized immediately. They were the same documents George had shown me, the ones Rose had prepared to declare me incompetent. "Can you tell me what day it is today?" he asked. "Friday, October 13th, I replied. "Can you tell me where you live?" "In the house I built with my husband 30 years ago at 1247 Oak Avenue." "Do you remember how much money you inherited in the will?" There was the trap. If I said I had only inherited a dusty envelope, it would confirm I had no resources and would be easier to declare incompetent. If I mentioned the 200 million, they would think I was delusional. "I remember perfectly," I replied, looking directly into Stephen's eyes, "that you inherited $30 million in companies and properties. I also remember that I received an envelope that you considered trash." The doctor scribbled something on his papers. Stephen smiled, thinking I had fallen into his trap. "And how do you feel about that distribution?" the doctor asked. "I feel," I said slowly, "like a woman who finally understands who the members of her family really are." Jessica and Stephen exchanged satisfied glances. They thought I was admitting confusion or resentment, emotions they could use to justify my commitment. The fake doctor closed his folder and whispered something to Stephen. Then he turned to me. "Mrs. Herrera, I believe it would be beneficial for you to spend a few days under medical observation. We have a very comfortable facility where you can rest while we evaluate your general condition." There it was, the final trap. "No, thank you," I replied with the firmest voice I could muster. "I feel perfectly capable of taking care of myself." "But Mom," Stephen said, and for the first time there was a real note of threat in his voice, "it's not a suggestion. The doctor believes you need specialized care." "The doctor," I replied, rising slowly, "can believe whatever he wants. But this is my house, and I decide who comes in and who goes out." At that moment, Jessica made the mistake I had been waiting for. She approached me with that venomous smile and said, "Mother-in-law, don't be difficult. We all know you can't take care of yourself anymore. It's time you accept reality and let the adults make the important decisions." The adults. As if I were a child, as if 45 years of marriage and building an empire had taught me nothing about life. I looked at Stephen, at Jessica, at the fake doctor, and I smiled for the first time in weeks. It was a smile they had never seen before, a smile that would have made Arthur proud. "You're right," I said softly. "It is time for the adults to make the important decisions. And that's exactly what I'm going to do." I took out my cell phone, the one George had given me, and pressed the record button. "I want to be very clear about what is happening here," I said in a firm voice as I recorded them. "My son Stephen, my daughter-in-law Jessica, and this supposed doctor are trying to force me into a facility against my will." The fake doctor immediately grew nervous. "Ma'am, this is just a routine medical evaluation." "Routine?" I answered, keeping the phone pointed at them. "Is it routine to come to my house unannounced? Is it routine to bring commitment papers already filled out?" Stephen tried to snatch the phone from me. "Mom, put that thing away. You're acting irrational." "On the contrary," I said, stepping away from him. "I'm behaving exactly as a woman should who discovered her own family plans to lock her away to steal her inheritance." Stephen's expression changed completely. The mask of the concerned son fell away, and for the first time I saw his true face, cold, calculating, dangerous. "We don't know what you're talking about," Jessica said, but her voice trembled. "I'm talking," I continued, pulling one of the photographs Arthur had left in the safe from my purse, "about this." It was a picture of Stephen leaving a casino at 3 o'clock in the morning, clearly drunk, accompanied by two men who were obviously not legitimate businessmen. I'm talking about the gambling debts. I'm talking about the money stolen from the company. I'm talking about the contract you already signed with Willow Creek to have me committed." The silence that followed was deafening. The fake doctor started backing toward the door. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'll be leaving." "Not so fast, doctor," I said, blocking his path. "How much did they pay you to sign false documents of mental incapacity?" The man turned pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm talking about this," I said, showing him another photograph where he appeared receiving an envelope of money from Stephen. "My husband hired private investigators during his final months. He documented every dirty move you made." Jessica began to cry, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure panic. "Mother-in-law, you don't understand. Everything we've done has been for your own good." "For my good?" I repeated, feeling a rage give me a strength I hadn't felt in years. "Stealing from the family business is for my good? Planning to flee the country with the money is for my good?" Stephen finally lost his composure. "Enough. You're a crazy old woman who doesn't know what she's talking about. Dad made a mistake leaving you anything. You're too stupid to handle money." There it was, the truth. After 45 years of pretending to love me, he finally showed what he really thought of me. "Stupid?" I asked, taking out my phone and dialing a number. "George, it's Eleanor. They're here, just as you predicted." "Yes, I've recorded everything." Stephen tried to take the phone from me again, but this time I didn't back down. "If you touch me," I said in a voice I didn't recognize as my own, "it will be the last thing you do as a free man." "What do you mean?" Jessica asked, her voice cracking. "I mean," I replied, "that right now, 3 criminal lawyers are reviewing evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping." Just then, the doorbell rang. It was 2 police officers, accompanied by George, Mrs. Herrera. One of the officers said, "We received your emergency call." Stephen and Jessica looked at each other in absolute terror. The fake doctor tried to sneak out, but George stopped him. "Dr. Evans, or should I say, Mr. Herrera, because you aren't a doctor, are you?" The man slumped into a chair. "They paid me $5,000 to sign some papers. I didn't know it was illegal." $5,000 to declare me mentally incompetent? I asked. "Is that what my freedom is worth?" The police began taking statements while George explained to me that this had been a controlled operation from the moment Arthur died. "Your husband anticipated every move," George told me, as the officers arrested the fake doctor. "He knew they would try to have you committed quickly, before you could react. That's why he prepared all this evidence and these legal proceedings." Stephen and Jessica weren't arrested that day, but the police warned them they were under investigation. When they finally left, my house was silent for the first time in weeks. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same one where Arthur and I used to watch television together, and I cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation. For the first time since my husband's death, I felt truly free. That night, I called both of my sons, not to plead or to try to fix things. I called them to give them an ultimatum. You have 24 hours to return every penny you stole from the family businesses. You have 24 hours to cancel the contract with Willow Creek. And you have 24 hours to confess the entire truth about your debts and your problems. Or what? Stephen asked with a defiant tone that no longer intimidated me. Or tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning, 3 local newspapers will publish the full story of your crimes. Or I hand all the evidence over to the district attorney's office. Or I use the legal powers your father left me to completely revoke your inheritances. The silence on the other end of the line confirmed that they finally understood who they were dealing with. "Impossible," Daniel muttered. "Dad left us everything in the will. You can't take what's already ours." "Want to bet?" I replied. And for the first time in my life, my voice sounded exactly like Arthur's when he was closing a tough deal. "Because it turns out your father was a lot smarter than you thought. And I'm a lot stronger than you imagined." I hung up before they could answer. I didn't need to hear any more lies, more excuses, more manipulation. It was time for them to learn that the woman they had underestimated for so many years had sharp claws when she needed to use them. The next morning, at 8 o'clock sharp, Stephen and Daniel appeared at my door. They didn't come with fake lawyers or commitment plans. They came with their tails between their legs, defeated, begging for mercy. "Mom, Stephen said, and for the first time in years there was no condescension in his voice. We need to talk. I let them in, but this time I didn't offer them coffee or a smile. I left them standing in the middle of the living room while I remained seated in my armchair, in the position of power I had earned. Talk, I said simply. Daniel started to cry. Mom, everything got out of control. The drugs, the debts, the loan sharks. We didn't know how to stop. And your solution was to rob me and lock me away? I asked. That wasn't the original intention, Stephen muttered. At first, we just needed to borrow some money. We thought we could pay it back before anyone noticed. But things got worse, Daniel continued. The cartel started threatening us. They said if we didn't pay, they would go after the family. So you decided to hurt me first, I replied. You decided it was better to lock me up like an animal than to face the consequences of your choices. Stephen knelt in front of my chair. Mom, we're your sons. We love you. We just made terrible mistakes. You love me? I asked, feeling all the rage that had built up for months finally find its voice. You call planning my commitment love? You call stealing the money your father and I built together love? You call treating me like trash at the will reading love? They didn't answer because there was no possible answer to those questions. But I want you to know something, I continued, standing slowly and walking to the window. Your father loved you. Despite everything he discovered, despite all the evidence he gathered against you, he loved you. That's why he left you a chance to redeem yourselves. I turned to face them. He left you $30 million, enough to pay all your debts and start over. But he also left me the power to take it away if you proved you didn't deserve it. Their faces paled as they understood the magnitude of what I was saying. What do you want us to do? Stephen asked, his voice cracking. I smiled, but it wasn't a motherly smile. It was the smile of a woman who had finally found her power. What I want, I said, walking slowly around my two sons kneeling in my living room, is for you to understand that the game has changed. For 69 years, I have been the obedient wife, the sacrificial mother, the invisible woman who cleans up others' messes. That's over. I looked them directly in the eyes, one by one. Stephen, I want you to call all your loan sharks right now and tell them they will get their money, but not from the money stolen from the company. They will get it from your own inheritance. His face fell. Mom, if I do that, I'll have nothing left. The debts are more than $3 million. Exactly, I replied, showing not a shred of compassion. You'll be left with exactly what you deserve after stealing from the family business for 3 years. Daniel, I continued, turning to my younger son, you are going to check into a rehabilitation center, not one of those luxury places where the rich go to pretend they're getting better. A real place where they will work with you seriously. Mom, I can quit on my own. I don't need rehab, he protested. How were you able to quit gambling on your own? I asked Stephen. How were you able to stop stealing money on your own? No, my sons. Addicts don't get better on their own. And you are going to get better, or you are going to lose everything. Daniel began to cry harder. They'll kill me in rehab. No, I said, taking out my phone. They won't kill you, because I'm going to pay them myself. But every dollar I pay for your debts will be deducted from your inheritance. I dialed a number I had written down days ago. Detective Miller, this is Eleanor Herrera. I have information about a drug trafficking ring operating out of the family's restaurants. Daniel went white as a sheet. Mom, what are you doing? I'm cleaning up the mess you created, I replied, speaking into the phone. Yes, detective, I have names, dates, photographs, and my son is willing to cooperate as a protected witness. I hung up and looked at Daniel. You are going to testify against the cartel. You are going to give the police all the information you have about their operation, and you are going to do it before you enter rehab. They'll kill me if I do that, he muttered. They'll kill you if you don't pay, I replied. At least this way, you have a chance to live and start over. Stephen tried to stand, but I stopped him with a look. I'm not finished with you. I took the documents George had given me from my bag. Did you know that your father left me in control of all the family businesses? Did you know that I can legally fire you right now? Panic filled his eyes. Mom, that company is all I know how to do. It's my life. It was your life, I corrected him. Until you decided to turn it into your personal cash register. I showed him the financial statements the forensic accountant had prepared. $3 million stolen over 3 years. Fake invoices, irregular transfers, ghost accounts. Do you know what this is? This is evidence of a federal crime. But there's a way to resolve this without involving the DA's office, I continued, seeing hope light up in his eyes. You are going to sign your resignation as CEO of all companies. You are going to transfer all of your shares to me. And you are going to work as a common laborer, earning a basic wage until you have paid back every penny you stole. A laborer? He asked, incredulous. You're going to start from the bottom, just like your father did. You're going to carry bricks. You're going to clean offices. You're going to do the work that real working men do every day. And you're going to learn what it means to earn money honestly. The humiliation on his face was evident, but there was something else too: respect. For the first time in years, he was seeing me as more than a harmless old woman. Jessica, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke. Mother-in-law, this is ridiculous. They can't accept these conditions. They're your sons. I turned to her with a smile that could freeze blood. Oh, really? And what are your options, my dear daughter-in-law? I took another photograph from my bag. It was Jessica kissing a young man in a hotel parking lot. Should I tell Stephen about your affair with the Pilates instructor? Or would you prefer to tell him yourself? Her face fell completely. Or would you prefer I tell him about the $50,000 you've been siphoning from the family account to buy yourself clothes and jewelry? Stephen looked at his wife with an expression of absolute betrayal. What is my mother talking about? Your wife, I continued, savoring every second of her discomfort, has been stealing from you for 2 years. And she's been sleeping with Rick, the Pilates instructor from the gym, for 6 months. Jessica started to deny everything, but I pulled out more photographs. Do you want me to keep showing evidence? Or are you going to confess the truth to your husband? Stephen stood up slowly, looking at Jessica, as if seeing her for the first time. Is it true? She cried, but she didn't deny anything else. Why? He asked. Because, I answered for her, she thought that when you inherited, she would have access to millions of dollars. She planned to stay with you until she had enough money to divorce you and take half. This can't be happening, Stephen muttered, holding his head in his hands. Oh, but it is happening, I said, feeling more powerful than I had in decades. And we're just getting started. I pulled the last document from my bag. This is a divorce agreement my lawyer prepared. Jessica is going to sign it now, without asking for a single penny in the division of assets. Because if she doesn't sign it, all these photographs will appear in the newspaper tomorrow, along with the evidence of her theft. You can't make me sign anything, Jessica said. But her voice was trembling. Can't I? I asked, dialing another number on my phone. Hello, Rick. This is Jessica's mother-in-law. Yes, I have some very interesting photographs that I think your wife would want to see. Jessica lunged at me, trying to grab the phone. Stop, he's married. His wife doesn't know anything. Exactly, I said, moving away from her. And unless you sign this divorce immediately, she's going to know everything. I hung up and held out a pen to her. You have 30 seconds to decide. Jessica signed the document with trembling hands, crying inconsolably. Stephen looked at her as if she were a stranger. Very well, I said, putting the signed document away. Now get out of my house and never come back. If I see you near this family again, I will make good on my threat to call Rick's wife. Jessica ran out without another word. I was left alone with my 2 defeated sons, sitting on my living room floor like punished children. Do you understand now? I asked them. Do you understand now that I am not the helpless old woman you thought I was? Daniel nodded, still crying. Mom, can you ever forgive us? I looked at him for a long moment before answering. That's up to you. If you do everything I've asked, if you truly get clean, if you learn to be men of honor like your father was, maybe. But it's going to take years. And you're going to have to earn my forgiveness every single day. Stephen finally lifted his head. Are you going to take our entire inheritance? No, I replied, and I saw relief in his eyes. I'm going to leave you a chance to earn it, but you are going to work for every dollar. You are going to prove you deserve the name you carry. And what if we can't do it? Daniel asked. What if we're too weak to change? I looked at him with a mixture of sadness and determination. Then you will miss the chance to know the mother you always had, but that you never bothered to see. I got up and walked to the window, turning my back to them. Your father left me $200 million, my sons. Enough money to live like a queen until the day I die. Enough money to help thousands of people who truly need it. You will decide if you want to be part of that story, or if you will be left on the outside, looking at what you could have had. When I turned around, they were no longer in my living room. They had left in silence, finally understanding that the power had changed hands for good. The following days were the quietest I'd had in months. For the first time since Arthur's death, my house truly felt like my own. There were no manipulative sons showing up unannounced. No venomous daughters-in-law making snide remarks. No fake doctors trying to declare me incompetent. Just me, my morning coffee, and the strange but liberating feeling of having total control over my life. Stephen kept his word, calling all his loan sharks and telling them they would receive their money from his own inheritance. Daniel voluntarily checked into a rehabilitation center on the outskirts of the city, and Jessica had completely disappeared, probably holed up in some hotel while she figured out how to rebuild her life after her perfect plan imploded. But I knew this was only the beginning. For 45 years, I had been the wife who supported from the shadows. Now it was time to find out who Eleanor was as an independent person, as a woman with power, as the heir to a $200 million empire. The first decision I made was to visit all the companies I now controlled. I wanted to meet the employees who had worked for Arthur for years. I wanted to understand exactly what my husband had built and how I could make it better. The first stop was the main construction company, where Stephen had been CEO until a week ago. When I arrived at the offices, dressed in a gray suit I had bought specially for the occasion, all the employees looked at me with curiosity. They knew I was the boss's widow, but they had never seen me in a professional context. "Good morning," I said to the 30 employees gathered in the conference room. "I am Eleanor Herrera, and from now on, I am the owner and CEO of this company." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. "I know some of you are concerned about the recent changes. I know you've heard rumors about financial troubles. I want you to know that those problems have been resolved and that this company will continue to operate under new policies of transparency and honesty." An older man, whom I recognized as Frank, the construction supervisor, raised his hand. "Mrs. Herrera, with all due respect, do you have experience running a construction company?" It was a fair question, and I had prepared the answer for days. "Frank," I replied. "For 45 years, I sat at the kitchen table with Arthur every night while he told me about every project, every problem, every important decision. For 45 years, I reviewed contracts, listened to phone calls, participated in business strategies. The difference is that now, instead of advising from the shadows, I will be leading from the front." Several employees nodded in approval. They had seen my dedication to the family for decades. "But there are changes that will be implemented immediately," I continued. "First, we are going to conduct a full audit of all finances from the last 3 years. I want to know exactly where every dollar went." I saw some of the accountants exchange nervous glances. They probably knew about Stephen's irregularities, but had remained silent out of fear. Second, we will implement a bonus system based on real productivity, not favoritism. Third, any employee who has information about past irregular activities can come speak with me privately, without consequences, to help me clean up this company. I raised my hand to stop the murmurs. And fourth, the minimum wage at this company will increase by 30%, effective immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, the applause began. These workers had watched Stephen spend money on luxury cars and expensive trips while they struggled to make ends meet. Now they had a boss who understood what it meant to work hard for every dollar. Over the next few hours, several employees came to my temporary office with information about the financial irregularities. They confirmed everything I already knew and added details that made my blood boil. Stephen hadn't just stolen to cover gambling debts. He had also been overbilling clients and keeping the difference. He had sold high-quality construction materials and bought cheap ones, pocketing the difference and compromising the safety of the projects. That afternoon, I visited the restaurants that had been Daniel's inheritance. The situation there was even worse. The managers confirmed that for months they had been pressured to accept special clients who paid in cash and didn't want receipts. The money laundering had been so blatant that several employees had considered quitting rather than be complicit. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked them. "Mrs. Herrera," replied Gloria, the manager of the main restaurant. "Mr. Daniel told us that if we spoke to anyone about the special clients, we would lose our jobs. Some of us have families to feed." The rage I felt at that moment was volcanic. My sons hadn't just stolen money. They had intimidated honest workers into being accomplices to their crimes. But I also discovered something beautiful during those visits. I discovered that Arthur's employees were hardworking, honest people who had genuinely respected my husband and were willing to respect my leadership if I proved to be fair. I discovered that I had natural business instincts that I had developed over decades without realizing it. I discovered that when I spoke with real authority, based on knowledge and experience, people listened. And I discovered something more important, that I liked having power. I liked making decisions. I liked being the boss instead of the invisible wife. That night, sitting in my study with a glass of wine and the company's financial statements spread across the desk, I called George. "How are the criminal investigations going?" I asked. "Very well," he replied. "Daniel is cooperating fully with the police from the rehab center. His testimony is going to dismantle the entire drug trafficking network that was operating in the restaurants. It's going to be a major case. And Stephen? Stephen is complying with the payments to his loan sharks. He started working as a laborer on one of his own construction sites. The employees are. Let's just say they're enjoying watching him carry bricks under the sundae." I laughed for the first time in weeks. Poetic justice tasted sweet. "But there's something else I need to discuss with you," I continued. "I want to establish a charitable foundation. I want to use part of this $200 million to help older women who are in vulnerable situations." George was quiet for a moment. "Women like you would have been if Arthur hadn't protected you." "Exactly," I replied. "Women whose children abandon or mistreat them. Women who have no resources to defend themselves. Women whom society considers invisible simply because they are older. That's a beautiful idea, Eleanor. Your husband would be proud." "I hope so," I murmured, touching the photograph of Arthur I had on my desk. The days passed, and slowly I began to rebuild not only the businesses, but also my relationship with my sons. Stephen came to visit me every Sunday after his week of physical labor. He was thinner, more humble, but also more real than he had been in years. "Mom," he said one Sunday, "I want you to know that for the first time, I understand what Dad felt when he built all this. Honest work has a different taste." Daniel called me from the rehab center twice a week. His conversations were painful but honest. "I'm learning to live without lying to myself," he told me in one call. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life." Were they going to earn my complete forgiveness? I didn't know. Were they going to one day get their full inheritance back? That was up to them. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by being someone's mother or someone's wife. I was Eleanor, a businesswoman, a philanthropist, a powerful woman in my own right. And that woman had big plans for the future, plans that went far beyond revenge, plans that were going to change lives, including my own. Arthur had given me the tools to defend myself, but I had chosen to use them for something bigger, to become the woman I always had the potential to be, but never had the chance to discover. 6 months after that, while reading that changed my life forever, I found myself standing in front of my bedroom mirror, preparing for the most important event since Arthur's death. That night was the launch of the Arthur and Eleanor Herrera Foundation for Vulnerable Senior Women. I was wearing a gold dress that I had chosen, especially for the occasion, not because it was the most expensive, but because it was the color of strength, the color of the power I had discovered within myself. As I put on the earrings Arthur had given me for our 20th anniversary, I thought about everything that had changed since that night I opened the dusty envelope my sons had despised. The foundation had already helped over 200 older women in its first few months of operation. Women like Rose, 73, whose children had emptied her bank account and left her living in deplorable conditions. Like Carmen, 68, who had been a victim of domestic violence for decades and finally found the courage to escape. like Patricia, 75, whose family had tried to declare her mentally incompetent to steal her pension. Every story I heard reminded me how close I had come to becoming one of those victims. And every woman we helped confirmed that I had made the right decisions. The phone rang as I finished getting ready. It was Stephen. Over these 6 months, our conversations had slowly evolved from hostility to something resembling mutual respect. "Mom," he said, and his voice sounded different, more mature. "I wanted to wish you luck at the launch tonight." "Thank you," I replied, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. "How are things at the construction site?" "Good," he answered. "We finished the affordable housing project you proposed today, seeing the families move into their new homes. I get why Dad loved this business. It was true. I had turned part of the construction company into a project for low-income housing. It was profitable, but it also had a social purpose that filled my heart." "Mom," Stephen continued, "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but can I come to the launch tonight?" The question took me by surprise. For months, I had kept my sons away from my new projects, not as punishment, but because I needed space to discover who I was without them. "Why do you want to come?" I asked. "Because," he said, and I heard real emotion in his voice. "I'm proud of you. Because I want people to know that I'm your son. Because for 35 years, I thought you were just my mom, and now I realize you are Eleanor Herrera, an extraordinary woman who just happens to be my mother." Tears began to roll down my cheeks. Those were the words I had waited decades to hear. "You can come," I finally said, "but you will come as a guest, not as privileged family. You will sit with everyone else, and you will listen to what I have built without your help." "Understood," he replied. "And Daniel?" "Daniel gets out of rehab next week. If he stays clean, if he continues to cooperate with the police, if he proves he has truly changed, then we can talk about his future in the family." I hung up the phone feeling a strange mix of hope and caution. My sons were changing, but I had learned not to blindly trust promises. This time they would have to prove their transformation with actions, not words. The launch event was held in the main ballroom of the city's most elegant hotel. Over 300 people had arrived. Business leaders, politicians, social workers, and especially older women who had found a second chance in our foundation. As I walked among the guests, greeting and thanking them for their support, I felt more alive than I had in years. These were my people now, not the family that had betrayed me, but the community I had chosen to build, the community of people who believed in second chances and in the dignity of older women. George approached me with a huge smile. "Eleanor, this is incredible. I've never seen such a positive response for a new foundation. It's because the need was real," I replied. "For decades, we older women have been invisible to society. It was time someone saw us." At that moment, I saw Stephen enter the ballroom. He was wearing a simple suit, nothing fancy, and he walked with a humility I had never seen in him before. Several guests recognized him, and I could see the curiosity on their faces as to why the son who had been disinherited was present at his mother's event. Stephen didn't try to approach me or claim any attention. He simply sat at a table in the back and waited. When it was time for my inaugural speech, I went up to the podium feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. Before me were 300 people who had come to support my vision. Behind me was the giant photograph of Arthur and me on our wedding day, reminding me where this journey had begun. "Good evening," I began, and my voice sounded stronger than I expected. 7 months ago, I was a 69-year-old widow who thought her life had ended with her husband's death. I thought my role in the world had been reduced to being the invisible mother of 2 adult sons and the grandmother who waited for occasional visits. "But," I continued, feeling confidence grow in my chest, "I discovered that life can begin at any age if we have the courage to make the hard decisions. I discovered that being older does not mean being invisible. I discovered that being 69 years old doesn't disqualify me from starting a new career, a new mission, a new version of myself." The applause started slowly and grew into a standing ovation. I saw tears in the eyes of many of the older women in the audience. They knew exactly what I was talking about because they had lived the same invisibility, the same underestimation. "This foundation," I continued when the applause died down, "exists because all women, regardless of their age, deserve dignity, respect, and opportunity. It exists because no woman should feel invisible or disposable simply because society has decided her value diminishes with the years. I searched for Stephen in the crowd. He was crying openly, with a look of pride and regret mixed on his face. This foundation also exists because I learned that forgiveness isn't something you give away. It's something that's earned. And that second chances are powerful, but only when they are accompanied by real change. I finished my speech by telling the story of an older woman who had come to our foundation last week. Her children had sold her house while she was in the hospital and split the money. When she was discharged, she had nowhere to live, and her own children told her to fend for herself. That woman, I said, now has a decent apartment, legal support to recover what was stolen from her, and a part-time job at our foundation helping other women in similar situations. Because it turns out that at 72 years old, she still had a lot to offer the world. She just needed someone to notice. When I stepped down from the podium, the ovation lasted for almost 5 minutes. One after another, women came up to hug me, to tell me their stories, to thank me for giving them a voice. But the most emotional moment came when Stephen timidly approached at the end of the night. "Mom," he said, with tears still fresh on his cheeks, "I want to apologize. Not just for the money, not just for the plan to have you committed. I want to apologize for not seeing you for 35 years. For treating you like you were just my mom instead of Eleanor Herrera, this incredible woman who was always there but who I was too blind to recognize." I looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Stephen," I finally said, "forgiveness is earned with time and actions. But respect, you've already earned that. You came here tonight expecting no privileges. You sat in the back without demanding attention. You cried with pride for my achievements instead of resentment for your situation. That tells me that maybe, just maybe, you're starting to become the man your father always hoped you would be." For the first time in 7 months, I hugged him, not as the mother who automatically forgives, but as the strong woman who recognizes genuine growth in another person. A year after that infamous day in Rose's office, I find myself sitting in the garden of my house, the same house my sons once wanted to sell to lock me away in a nursing home. But everything has changed. The garden is more beautiful than ever because I now have time to tend to it myself. The businesses are running better than when Arthur was alive because I've learned that leading with both the heart and the head produces better results than leading with ambition alone. And my family? Well, my family has become something I never thought possible. A real family, based on mutual respect instead of false obligations. Daniel got out of rehab 6 months ago and has been clean ever since. It wasn't easy. There were relapses, crisis nights, moments where I thought I had lost him for good. But something changed when he testified against the drug traffickers who had been blackmailing him. Seeing those criminals go to prison because of his testimony gave him a purpose that drugs never could. He now works at the foundation, helping other recovering addicts. His salary is modest compared to what he used to have, but he tells me it's the first money he's earned that he feels truly proud of. "Mom," he told me last week, "I never thought helping other people could fill the void I was trying to fill with cocaine." Stephen has also changed, though his path has been different. After a year working as a laborer on his own construction sites, I promoted him to supervisor, not out of favoritism, but because the other workers respected his transformation. He had learned what it means to earn every dollar with honest sweat. He had learned the names of all the employees, their family stories, their real needs. "It's strange," he told me a few days ago, as we had coffee in my kitchen, "but I feel like I'm only now understanding what Dad built. It wasn't just money. It was a community of people who depended on us to feed their families. He had divorced Jessica, who had vanished from our lives as quickly as she had appeared. We didn't know where she was, nor did we care to know. But the biggest change wasn't in my sons, it was in me. For 70 years, I had defined my worth through my relationships with others, as a daughter, as a wife, as a mother. I had never existed simply as Eleanor. Now, when I wake up each morning, I am not Arthur's widow or the mother of Stephen and Daniel. I am the CEO of 4 thriving companies. I am the founder of an organization that has helped over 500 older women reclaim their dignity. I am a 70-year-old woman who is living the most exciting and productive decade of her life. I am someone who makes important decisions, who influences the lives of thousands of people, who builds legacies that will last for generations. The foundation has expanded beyond my wildest dreams. We now have 3 shelters for older women who are victims of family abuse, a free legal aid program, a job training center that teaches new skills to women who thought their careers were over, and a micro-loan program that helps senior entrepreneurs start small businesses. Last week, a 65-year-old woman who had been unemployed for 2 years opened her own bakery with one of our microloans. When she cut the ribbon at the grand opening, she was crying with joy because she finally felt useful, valuable, and capable again. But perhaps the project I am most proud of is the Grandmother Mentor Program. We connect older women with business experience with young female entrepreneurs who need guidance. It turns out that decades of life experience, of having navigated family and financial crises, of having raised families and supported husbands in building businesses, makes us exceptional mentors. The young women need us more than we thought, and we have more to offer than society had ever recognized. It's beautiful to see how the wisdom of one generation becomes the springboard for the success of the next. George visited me yesterday to discuss the legal documents for a new expansion of the foundation. "Eleanor," he said as we reviewed contracts, "did you ever imagine you would become all this?" "Never," I answered honestly. "For 45 years, I thought my destiny was to be invisible, that my role was to support the dreams of others without having any of my own." "And now?" he asked. "Now," I said, looking out the window at the garden where Arthur and I used to walk together. "Now I understand that he didn't just leave me money in that dusty envelope. He left me permission to become who I always could have been, but never dared to be. This afternoon, I have a meeting with the mayor. He wants the foundation to partner with the city government to create a pilot program that could be expanded nationally. Assisted living programs that respect the independence of older women. Day centers where they can socialize and stay active without feeling like burdens on their families. Public policies that recognize that older women are a valuable social resource, not a problem to be hidden away. The idea of influencing policies that will affect thousands of women across the country excites me more than any inheritance I could have received. My sons come for lunch with me every Sunday. Not out of obligation, but because they genuinely enjoy my company. Our conversations have evolved from apologies and resentment to real debates about business, about life, about the future. Stephen consults me on important decisions at the construction company. Daniel tells me about the difficult cases he handles at the foundation. They ask for my advice not because I am their mother, but because they respect my judgment as a businesswoman and as a person. It's the family relationship I always wanted, but never knew how to build when we were younger. Have I forgiven them completely? That's a question I often ask myself. Forgiveness, I've discovered, is not an event, but a process. Every day that I see Stephen treat his employees with genuine respect, I forgive his past arrogance a little more. Every day that I see Daniel help another recovering addict, I forgive his betrayal a little more. But more important than forgiving them, I've learned to forgive myself. To forgive myself for being invisible for so many years. To forgive myself for accepting emotional crumbs when I deserved banquets of love and respect. The dusty envelope I received that day in Rose's office sits on my desk as I write these reflections in my journal. It no longer contains just the bank account number that changed my life. Now it holds letters from women we have helped, photographs of project inaugurations, newspaper clippings about the foundation's achievements. It has become a symbol of transformation, of second chances, of the beauty that can arise from the ashes of humiliation. Every time I look at it, it reminds me that endings can be beginnings, that crises can be opportunities, and that it is never too late to become who you are destined to be. If I could go back and speak to the Eleanor who walked out of that office crying a year ago, I would tell her, don't cry for what you have lost. Celebrate what you are about to gain. Don't lament the sons who betrayed you. Prepare to meet the men they are going to become. Don't cling to the invisible woman you were. Free yourself to become the powerful woman you always had inside you. I would tell her that the pain she feels in this moment is the birth pang of a new life, and that new life is going to be more beautiful, more meaningful, and more powerful than she ever dared to dream. And to you, dear listeners, who have heard my story to the end, I ask, How many times in your lives have you accepted being invisible when you deserved to be seen? How many times have you accepted crumbs when you deserved banquets? How many times have you allowed others to define your worth instead of discovering your own power? My story is not just about an unexpected inheritance or a dysfunctional family. It's about the moment we decide to stop surviving and start truly living. It's about the moment we realize that it is never too late to write a new chapter of our lives. Because it turns out that the best years of our lives can be ahead of us, not behind us, if we have the courage to claim our power and use it for something bigger than ourselves.